I'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday, January 25th, 2022's meeting of the Board of Selectmen for the town of Oxford. Number one on the agenda is going to be Pledge of Allegiance, so please rise and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes for August 31st, 2021 and September 21st, 2021. We're going to take separate votes on this. So I move that the board vote to approve the minutes of the meeting dated August 31st, 2021 as written, as written.
Are those the executive session minutes?
Those are the executive session minutes.
I can second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on August 31st? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Abstain?
Yes.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That's 4 in affirmative, 1 abstention. August 31st, 2021 is approved as written. Second is going to be the meeting minutes for September 21st, 2021. I move that the board vote to approve the minutes of the meeting dated September 21st, 2021 as written.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick couple of questions.
Sure.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dee for updating them. That was very helpful. I very much appreciate it. I had a question in terms of normally, at least I have never seen this before, but it looks like in the meetings, in the minutes, there is an asterisk representing some itemizing or referencing rather some Mass General laws and Board of Selectmen policies. I've never seen this before. Is this something we're going to be doing moving forward for all of our meeting minutes, or is this something that was just particular to this set of minutes, I should say?
As of right now, it is particular to this set of minutes because, as you stated, it's not something that's common practice.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's been done previously. As you're well aware, this was a very controversial meeting with a lot of confusion that took place.
Right.
And the asterisk is in there just to clarify some questions and concerns in regards to what was discussed.
I understand. Okay.
So.
I would go on record and say that obviously this decision was made prior to above my pay grade, so to speak, but I don't know if I necessarily see the reasoning or the purpose for doing this, especially if we don't do it on other meetings. I just would like to go on record and say that.
Okay.
But other than that, Dee did a phenomenal job pulling all of these together. She really did. Thank you.
In the meeting minutes, motion was made, seconded, and I need to make a statement or have it noted that I have a schwannoma on my hearing lobe, which means that I have a very inefficient hearing capacity. Hearing aids only make noise louder for me, so I can't wear hearing aids. So I did not hear that second. Okay, so I just want to note that, please. Thank you.
Okay. Noted. Selectwoman Trana.
I also, as you know from email correspondence, also had been questioning the applicability of the asterisk. While I certainly don't have a problem with educating, I don't think that it's necessarily appropriate to add them to the minutes because it didn't actually happen during the meeting. So I would actually like to see it removed, and I'm not opposed to educating the public as to those points. However, I don't think that they're in the appropriate spot because we didn't speak about it at the meeting. And it wasn't even added into record until the first time that I saw it was today.
Okay.
So I would be okay with approving the minutes without the asterisk included. Just my opinion.
Okay. Again, as you were aware, very controversial meeting. Took a lot to get the meeting minutes typed up as accurately as we can display them. The question being brought is whether or not Chairman LaMarche at the time had the authority to remove any member from the meeting. And the asterisk is just calling out Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20G. No person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceeding of a meeting of a public body. If after clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceedings, the chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting. And if the person does not withdraw, the chair may authorize a constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. And that's the asterisk that's in question. We know that these meeting minutes, regardless of how they're approved, are probably going to continue to be controversial. So I'm pretty sure that's the purpose of that in there. Again, just educating the public with all the public records requests we've been getting. So it's the pleasure of the board. If the board would like to amend the minutes,
Well, I think we have a motion. We have a motion and a second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as written.
And I'd like to amend them to remove both of the asterisks because they were not discussed at the actual meeting, and the minutes are supposed to reflect what was discussed at the actual meeting.
Okay. I mean, in fairness, your statement that you were reading off of that evening is going to be attached to the minutes as well.
I know it'll be attached, and the only reason that I gave it to Dee was because you had brought up that anything that you read off of had to be handed over, so
Okay.
I did
Fair-
that out of
fair
respect
enough.
for a point that you had made. I mean, if you don't want to include it, I'm fine with that. I was only following your point from a previous meeting.
If I may, Chairman, I would respectfully disagree because the question was asked about authority, and that's the answer to that question. So I think it's very pertinent to have that included with those minutes.
With all due respect, the question was asked because I was trying to figure out if it was a premeditated phone call or not. It was more of a rhetorical question.
Okay.
So that's why I think that it's not really, while it's important to educate, absolutely, it wasn't a part of the actual conversation at the time of the meeting.
Okay. So amended motion is on the table.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second for the amendment to remove the asterisk. Any further discussion?
So what are we voting on?
The amendment. So the approval of the meeting minutes minus the
Yeah.
All right,
footnotes.
thank you.
I'll call for a vote.
I'm sorry, we're approving, this is for the
For the
amendment.
amendment.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Abstain?
No,
Yes.
And I will vote yes for this. So that is 3 affirmative, 1 abstention, and 1 no. The meeting minutes have passed.
No, the amendment.
The
Amendment.
amendment, sorry. Yes, thank you.
So now you have to do the next vote on the amended motion.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to be amending the meeting minutes to remove the asterisk. So now I will call for a vote to approve the meeting minutes
Without that.
without the asterisk.
Do you want a motion or no?
I make that motion.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Call for a vote,
Yes?
Abstain?
No,
Yes.
and I will vote yes as well. 3 in affirmative, 1 no, 1 abstention. Meeting minutes have passed. That brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is the open meeting law complaint from Casey Fleming of 59 Quabog Ave, Oxford, which was received December 12th, 2021. This agenda item is the response update. So the first letter I had sent to him, Mr. Fleming, I had mentioned that we would make our best effort to approve the backlog of meeting minutes by our January 11th meeting. Due to needing corrections on those minutes, we were unable to meet that timeline. As of tonight, we have met that timeline, so I think we are all caught up on our backlog of minutes. So I just wanted to update the board on that. Next item on the agenda is going to be the annual animal control warrants. Going to be looking for a vote to allow myself, Chairman Daniels, to sign the warrants for our animal control officers, Kathleen Flynn and Edward Hart. This vote will enable them to carry out their duties as outlined in Chapter 140, Section 137 of the Massachusetts General Law. I will make a motion that the board allows chairman to sign the warrant of the animal control officers, Kathleen Flynn and Edward Hart.
I second that motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote,
Yes?
Yes.
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 and I will vote yes. That is 5 in the affirmative. Next item on the agenda is discussion of the police interview process. We have Police Chief Sad present here tonight. Chief, I'll ask you to come join us up front. While you're getting settled in, I'll kind of give a little bit of background to the board. Next meeting, we're going to be presented candidates for police positions within the town of Oxford. This is going to be the first interview process that I've conducted here in town. I'm not sure how else that goes for everybody else. So I invited Chief Sad out to kind of walk us through what to expect, so we are prepared.
Good evening.
Evening, Chief.
Good to see everybody here, Madam Manager. As you're aware, next week you're going to be interviewing 4 candidates for police officer. So let me just give you a snapshot of how we came to be here today. So if you recall, back in October, I came before the board requesting 2 positions. We received a civil service list. When the list came in, they released all Oxford candidates, which there were only 9. So we took a look at all 9 Oxford candidates. They were notified by civil service that the list was here in your office and to have them come in and indicate their willingness to accept or not accept the position. So when that happened, 7 of those 9 individuals came in to sign the roster. Of the 7, 1 indicated that they did not want the position because they had already accepted a job with another police department. That left us with 6 willing to accept. During the initial stages of the process, 1 candidate withdrew for personal reasons, and another did not return their application packet, so thereby effectively withdrawing. So that left us with 4 for consideration. All of them are Oxford residents, and I'm going to give you the names in order of civil service ranking, and later on, after I answer your questions, I'm going to have the lieutenant come up and hand out the extensive background packets that we conduct on each candidate. That will give you a week to review the packets before the interview next week. The first person on the list is Mr. Patrick Chalker, Miss Justina LaPierre, Alexander Rondon, and Michael Buxton. So what will happen is, I believe your office, D, has already prepared letters for these individuals, right? And they've been mailed out to have them attend the meeting next week at 7 o'clock. When they arrive here next week at 7, we will sequester them in the next room, and you can interview them one by one and ask your series of questions. I would suggest that you keep them somewhat general. Any police-related questions, of course, they will learn all the answers to those if they get fortunate enough to get into the academy, and they'll acquire that knowledge along the way. But you can glean quite a bit of information from the individual, how they handle day-to-day questions. So I would suggest maybe a question or two apiece. I would suggest, according to civil service guidelines, that you keep the questions consistent as you ask them of each candidate. So essentially, what you ask of candidate 1, you have to ask of candidate 4, just in case there's an appeal. So with that said, I will entertain any questions that you might have about the process itself.
Board members? Yes.
Are we still interviewing for 2 positions?
Well, my request next week will be for 3.
Okay.
And the reason why I asked for 3 is we definitely have one opening. I'm looking for the 17th patrolman position. We're looking at several retirements in 2023. So just as an example, several of these candidates do not have police academy, as you will see. The next available police academy, should we be fortunate to get into it, is not until June. So by the time they go in June, if we can get the candidates in that one, great. The next one starts at the end of July. So we will not see these individuals until Christmas back at the PD. By the time they complete their field training and actually get handed the keys to a cruiser, we're well into 2023, about the same time where officers will be retiring. So this will act as a bridge for us, getting us to that point in time when officers leave. So it should be a smooth transition, and it's about planning and getting ahead of the curve on this, so we don't face any unnecessary hardships with personnel and staffing. And I've had extensive conversations with the manager and the finance director about this already, and we anticipate being able to work through that to make it happen.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? So at this time, like the chief stated, the questions need to be consistent. We have approximately 15 minutes for each candidate. So my question for the board would be, does the board want to receive, does the board want to develop their own individual questions that they want to ask? In which case, I would ask that the board members get that to me as soon as possible so that we can put it in the packet and just confirm as we're going along that we're consistent with the questions. Or does the board want to be presented with questions that they will ask along with the score sheet? It's not necessarily, we don't necessarily need a vote, just looking for consensus on
If I may, Mr. Chair, I believe in the past, we have gotten example questions presented to us, so we'd have an idea of the appropriate questions to ask. So I don't know if that's still available, if that's something.
Okay.
I can provide some sample questions if the board would like, and I can get them to D tomorrow.
Okay. That would be awesome.
Right. And then,
Greatly
once
appreciated.
once your questioning is complete of the candidates, then I will make a presentation to you based on my recommendations of the candidate and how we, as a department and command staff, arrived at those particular decisions.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Are we limited to the number, like, there's 5 of us, so if we each ask 2 questions, it's probably gonna take more than 15 minutes. So is this something that we're gonna submit our request based on that list, and then we can narrow it down to,
Correct.
the 5 of us can probably have a discussion as to what we think is most important, or, again, I've never gone through this process, so I wanna make sure it's,
Right. So we're limited on time. So the questions you'll be assigned 1 or 2, unless you want to write your own questions. Questions that you think you would be able to, make the best judgment off the scoring sheet. I will make sure that you get the scoring sheet as soon as possible, so that you can kind of look over that and try and figure out what you're looking for in the answer from the candidates. And then we'll put our score sheets together at the end of the interview. Our score sheets, based off the recommendation of Chief Sad, will kind of guide us in determining how we want to move forward with that.
Thank you.
Selectman LeBlanc makes a good point. 15 minutes is a short period of time when each of you are asking 2 questions. So if it does stray over, it strays over. They will wait for their turn. That's all, if it's a little bit later. That's at the discretion of the chair and the board, of course, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, with that said, I'll have Lieutenant Marcelonis hand out the background investigation package to you. And there's some police academy information in there as well.
Okay.
That I put in there. And what I would ask is, when you're done with those packets, if you could just return them to Dee, because they will eventually be shred. And we may keep one packet in your office just for future reference, but all the others will be shredded.
Okay.
So in theory, we could leave them here Tuesday
Thanks,
after the
Billy.
meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put mine down on the floor.
Thank you.
And one more for the manager.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of the board in regard to this? Chief, thank you for coming in tonight and
Thank you.
presenting. We'll be looking forward to the sample questions, and board members, if you have any questions that you specifically want to ask, separate of the sample questions, just try and get those to me, so we can have it all put together.
Okay, you're welcome, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Chief.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next item on the agenda is review of board selectmen policies. The first policy I am presenting to the board this evening is policy number 1801. It's titled Radios. No radios shall be installed in a private vehicle without the permission of the Board of Selectmen. And this was adopted July 19th, 1976. Have all of the board members had the opportunity
You weren't
to
born then,
review?
right?
No, I was just a kid.
Yeah, just a kid, yeah.
Have all the board members had
Only
the
expresses the way.
opportunity to review the minutes from when this was adopted?
Yes.
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 So I'm hoping tonight that you realize and understand the how outdated this policy is. The discussion being had that resulted in this policy was that there was a gentleman in town that had a police radio in his private vehicle because he was working around town, but was able to respond to incidences if needed, and the select board decided they wanted to have some oversight on that. So I would entertain a motion to repeal this policy.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Do we want to have some discussion on it first?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, let's have some discussion.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So, when you were talking about that, there was what did you say? There was someone driving around in town with a radio. You're talking about back in 1976, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. In 1976, there was, I believe it was the recreation, the gentleman was working for the recreation department.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And there weren't enough radios to go around to
Sure.
the people that actually needed radios.
Gotcha.
So there was a little bit more restriction on that.
Gotcha.
Times have changed significantly. And since there really is no context to this policy, if you don't have the meeting minutes, I think the policy is very outdated.
I agree. So, if I may, so this only talks about a review of the policies. This doesn't talk about a creation of a new policy?
I'm not looking to create any new policies.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So, I guess I could have given some more background
That's
before we
okay.
jumped into
Yes,
it.
thank you.
Our policy binder, as you're aware, is burdensome,
Yep.
with many outdated policies as what we're being presented tonight. My goal is to start whittling away at some of the policies that aren't relevant anymore to the town, and moving forward, kind of if board members want to create policies or amend policies, or even have policies that they'd like to see repealed, by all means, get that to me and we'll get them on an agenda.
Okay.
Depending on how agendas are looking time-wise, it's going to be a goal of mine to kind of get a few policies on
Gotcha.
each agenda moving forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, my thought on the radios is that I definitely understand back in 1976 where this was coming from. I do definitely understand that. The only concern that I have is that radios are typically town property, for lack of a better term. So they're town property. They have to be installed. If they're going to be in a private vehicle, if the radios are indeed town property and not purchased on their own, of course, then I think that someone should know about that. Correct? If it's I'm Cheryl LeBlanc and I call up someone and say, hey, I want the town to pay a radio and I'm a selectman and, I just want that radio in my vehicle so I can hear what's going on and whatnot. If the town's going to pay for that radio, then that's a benefit to me, and I think someone should know about that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't mind if people have radios in their cars, because I think it helps them, especially like with our volunteer department, fire department and stuff. But I'm just thinking that someone should know about it. And if we're going to pay for it, then someone should have the authority to make that decision to pay for that radio. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so my understanding of that would be that the radios would be purchased by the specific departments. So it would be the department heads that would be making the approval as to whether or not individuals could have radios installed. With the advancement of technology,
Yep. You can do it on your phone, right?
a lot of departments are moving towards phones.
Yep.
A cell tower based radio system. There's portable radios which don't have to be installed in the vehicles. And then, like you had mentioned, people can go out and buy their own radios and install them themselves. And the frequencies are typically available online to figure out.
Right.
Again, I think this is something that the department heads can manage, and not necessarily a requirement of the Board of Selectmen to have a policy on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have anybody in town that has a town radio in their personal vehicle, not a town-owned vehicle? Animal control, that's a town-owned vehicle, where before it wasn't, the person was using their own vehicle to conduct the business, and then it sounds like recreation was doing it. Now, first, if it's a mute question about having that on our policy, if nobody's gonna be able to, have like Cheryl said, get a town radio installed in their vehicle, because, and then what for? So,
The other thing is, excuse me if I may, Mr. Chairman, the laws of procurement have changed, as well as the administrative structure of the town over time has changed. So anytime these kinds of things are purchased, there are parameters in which we would follow. And obviously, we don't put radios in people's private vehicles. I'm the town manager, I don't have a radio in my private vehicle. And that would be something would be frowned upon. As a management thing, we wouldn't want to do that. Obviously, we do talk radios and we do talk procurement for radios, for communications, and the board's well aware of that, and that goes through a process. And, and they're approved through a process. So, but this is installation in vehicles, and we just don't do that. you know, not in
Town.
non-town vehicles, yes.
Any other questions?
I just want to understand. I think I understood. We currently don't have any personal vehicles being used for.
This is saying installing
No,
a
no,
radio.
But no, you said like you said you don't have one in your car. Obviously, you know what I mean. But other employees that have radios currently are using town vehicles already. Correct? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we have the police chief. Why don't you talk about this? Because I think part of it is letting go of something that's very old and archaic, and I think that's just why
No,
perhaps
I
the
don't think that's
chairman-
it. I think I just,
No,
I just want to
I'm
understand.
confused about
I'm going
asking
to
about.
Dennis's point that it's not currently a thing that we have employees with town radios in their personal cars.
I think this is what talking about.
Installed, like physically installed, like bolted, wired, whole
And
nine
like,
yards.
and you mean bought by the town?
Bought by the town and
Those towns.
physically hardwired to it. To your knowledge, we don't currently have any.
The answer for the police department is no.
No, right.
Correct.
Chief?
We don't use personal vehicles.
And I didn't think so, and that's what I'm just trying to say. I'm trying to go to Dennis's point that if we don't currently have employees that need radios using their personal vehicles, I mean, I know we have a lot of DPW owned, like town-owned vehicles. I don't believe the DPW uses their personal vehicles.
Obviously, there was a point in time where
Right.
employees were required
Right.
to use their personal vehicle, and it was expected, and they
Right.
just did it.
And we've shifted
Right,
from
and
that, so I'm
so-
just trying to confirm that.
1976.
Right, as departments became established and better financed, right, we're able to move away from personal
Right.
vehicles to official vehicles. So
Right.
it's highly unlikely, other than if anybody has a radio in their car, they're employed.
Right. I mean, you listen
And
to
it's
it
just
on
a
your phone
portable-
anyway,
it's a
like
portable radio.
pull the scanner app
Right.
and listen on that or whatever, so.
And I'm asking Chief Sellers to join us too, just to kind of touch base on the fire department side.
Currently, at the moment, we do not have any mobile radios assigned to personal vehicles. Now, that doesn't mean that a career person doesn't take their portable radio home and have it in their car.
But it's not installed.
But it is not
Is
installed.
the point of this radio is the actual installation, so I think I'm on the same page that this policy is quite antiquated and that, I mean, you're gonna have your portable radio or your cell phone that's got the scanner app on it or whatnot. So I think that to get away from the actual installation in a personal vehicle, I don't believe that happens anymore.
Yeah, there was a time where it was pretty prevalent in town.
Yeah.
But not anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Welcome.
for-
Thank you.
Sorry to put you on the spot like that. So, with that being said, I would entertain a motion to repeal policy 1801 from the Board of Selectmen policies.
I would second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
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 And I will vote yes. That's 5 in affirmative. Policy number 1801 no longer exists in the Town of Oxford Board of Selectmen policy binder.
I just want to go on record and say I really enjoyed those minutes from 76.
Oh my gosh. They
There were
brutal.
single, yeah, I was having a hard time following it, but there was single-spaced typewriter.
Typewriter.
I got halfway through and I had to stop.
Yeah, I'm like, there was a lot of
6
stuff
years
going on
ago.
back in 76.
No,
lot
you
of
laughed, but I remember
A lot of
back,
things have
Oh,
happened.
you must, yeah.
there was a bylaw that said the town had to put a trough in the center of town so people could water their horses. And that was like in the 80s.
Right.
So we're doing a good job. in-
1880s?
No, not 18.
I don't know, maybe we have one of those.
Yeah, we might have
somewhere
one.
for-
Second policy that I'm presenting to the board tonight is policy number 1803. It's titled Ribbon Cutting, and it reads, "All ribbon cutting ceremonies are to be held at 8:30 a.m. weekdays and any time on Saturdays and Sundays." And just so the board is aware, I quickly read through 1974 and 1976, I believe, meeting minutes. Again, all typewriter. I could find nothing that supports this policy. My opinion, which is what I'm looking for with discussion, is that we should not limit limit businesses opening and the ceremonies that they have to this specific time. I think businesses should make that decision, and if any one of us or all of us could make a genuine effort to try and be there for their opening ceremony, then we can. But I don't feel the Board of Selectmen necessarily needs to have a policy on that. And with that being said, any discussion?
No.
Hearing none, I will make a motion to repeal policy 1803, ribbon cutting, from the Board of Selectmen binder.
I make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
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 And I will vote yes. That's 5 in affirmative. Policy number 1803 has been repealed. The last one for this evening is policy 1905 alpha, titled Selectmen Signatures. And it states, at a regularly scheduled and posted meeting of the Oxford Board of Selectmen held on Tuesday, July 29th, 1997, the following motion was made by Selectman Bigwood and seconded by Selectman Mackey, that no letters or appointment papers go out of the Selectman's office until every Selectman has an opportunity to sign. The motion was carried unanimously. The minutes were attached for your viewing pleasure. The policy was adopted July 29th, 1997. The discussion I'd like to have about this one is that, as we are all well aware, no individual select person has authority. We are a board of selectmen. Unless the board votes to give somebody authority to sign, our professional staff is well aware to hold on to any official paperwork and documents that we have until a quorum has signed the policy. Effectively making this policy
Moot?
Yeah, moot. I won't say useless. Any discussion?
I
Yes.
do. So the one thing that I would like to say about this policy is that I do think that when the board does send out something, whether it be in a letter or an appointment paper, I do think that it does look much better and more, I don't want to say special, but more important, I guess is the word to use, when everyone has had an opportunity to sign it. I think that when you send out like a certificate, for example, when there's only 3 people who are able to come in and sign, I think it looks much better when the full complement of the board signs it. So I would be happy to repeal this one, but I would like to encourage everyone to sign some of those documents. I mean, I know some things we only need 3 signatures for, but sometimes it just looks better when everyone has signed it.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I know every effort is typically made
Right.
to reach out to the select board and say, hey, please
Yep.
come in at your earliest convenience to sign. And with that being said, sometimes there's just time constraints.
Sure.
But yes, I totally agree. We should be making every effort possible with our proclamations and our certificates and stuff to have the whole board present. Yes, Selectman Triana.
So I agree. Is it possible that maybe instead of getting rid of it, we could maybe amend it and give like a time limit? Because I do think that it's nice to afford everybody the opportunity to come in. And obviously there are times that there's time constraints and you only need 3 signatures and it's not a big deal if there's 3 signatures or not. But things like an Eagle Scout proclamation or, the various proclamations that we do, for different departments or whatnot. I think, like Cheryl said, it's sends a much more positive message if you have a full complement of the board signing it. And maybe it's a situation where you have a quorum on it, but the other 2 members want to come in at the end of the week and sign it. Like, is it something that instead of just getting rid of the policy, we can say, we'll allow everyone the ability to sign it up to a week or whatnot before we have to send the non-time sensitive things out? Just a thought, because I agree, obviously we do wait, but I also think it's important that we do have everyone have the opportunity to sign it. And that's really all this policy is doing is guaranteeing the opportunity for everyone to sign it. Not necessarily saying everybody has to, but that they're afforded the opportunity for it.
Yeah. I mean, the way it's worded now, it is very restrictive to where we're not supposed to send anything out until everybody signs it. So yes, an amendment, or at least that's the way I'm interpreting it. No letters or appointment papers go out of the selectman's office until. So I guess it's kind of open
an-
for interpretation.
An
Because you can open
opportunity.
opportunity up to.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't mean
Okay,
everyone
I see.
has
Has
to
an
sign it,
opportunity.
but everyone has an opportunity. So you're not saying you have to come in and sign it today or I'm sending it out.
Yeah.
You know, you have to give.
Okay.
And I think it's just affording people the option to come in. And if you choose not to come in or you shoot, Dean email and say, I'm not gonna come in and sign this, maybe give her a heads up so that we're not just holding things in the folder.
Like, meaning if someone's on vacation or something
Right,
like that. yeah.
just, I'm not gonna be in to sign it because I'm out of town, so go ahead and sign it, send it off without me, or, use my signature that you have saved on file and apply it that way, or,
Okay. So with that being said, I will entertain a motion to present an amended version of policy 1905 alpha at the next available scheduled meeting of the Board of Selectmen.
do we even need a motion if it's just a
To amend it to.
discussion, though?
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I think there's a confusion about the difference between letters, appointment papers, and what has been being discussed here tonight, which is citations. So I think you should be, there's an awful lot of work that gets done and processed through the Board of Selectmen's office. And at times, it is just the chairman of the board as the person who is the chief executive that may be signing on behalf of the town and the Board of Selectmen at times where it's not every single member of the board. So I think this was looking at, letters and appointment papers, regular letters that may go out that are, uniquely signed by the Board of Selectmen chairman. Citations are different, things that are all joint signatures are different, whether it's, when we're filing the tax recap and setting the tax rate, we want everyone's signatures. And I think the Board of Selectmen's office knows that even for licenses that we put out, we leave them, try to give as much time as possible for people, and sometimes people get in and sometimes they don't. But I don't think it's trying to prevent that from happening. I think it was looking at the fact that it does happen, and, things like citations, we would want to have as many people's signatures on, because that's why they're called a citation, right? And I agree with the vice chair that those things look good, but it doesn't say citation in here in this policy. So you have to be careful to not start adding language that might confuse what I think the intent might have been for this particular person who put this into play in 1997. So maybe take a look at that language and come back to the board so that you're really clear, because I think that there's an interplay here that might actually make it more confusing.
Gotcha.
And I don't want to have that, this is not me, but I'm just speaking for her, because I didn't actually even put this out here, just thinking about it now from a process standpoint, sorry.
Yeah.
Gotcha. You want a motion to defer it?
Since I made the motion, can I?
I don't think
Would it
anybody
be
seconded
revoked?
it.
Oh, it wasn't
No,
seconded.
no, it wasn't
so,
seconded.
Okay, so not on the table. So we can readdress this policy at a later time. I will attempt to present you an amended policy
Okay,
at the next
Sounds
next
good.
meeting.
that makes sense.
Good.
It is really open to interpretation on a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
But it's very well written.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not complaining. It's very well written, but it's just, okay.
I'm going to pass over the next agenda item and come back to that a little bit later. We're going to move on to the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the board. The first item on my manager's report is just to announce that the 2022 annual town election calendar has actually been put together by our town clerk. She's formulated it as the calendar date for the annual May election on May 17th, 2022. The first day to obtain nomination papers will be Tuesday, February 1st. Hence, that's why I'm notifying you today. And the last day to obtain papers will be March 25th. And all papers will need to be returned that are nomination papers that have been signed on March 29th. And I've included in your packets the list of positions that are available. They're also listed on our website under the town clerk's election tab. The next item is Oxford Fire EMS grant. I think we have in attendance Deputy Fire Chief and Chief Prevention Officer, Fire Prevention Officer. It's been an eventful week, which I know which is the second item on my agenda for reporting. So just why don't we come up and announce the good news, which is the Oxford Fire EMS Department has been awarded a $16,738.79 grant from the Executive Office of Public Safety and the Department of Fire Services. And Deputy, why don't you tell us what the hope is to be able to use this money for the department?
Yeah, we're looking to, we're going to use the grant to purchase turnout gear. We are in the process of streamlining our older year out. After 10 years, we're not allowed to use it anymore. So as the gear gets older, we get rid of it. We're buying more. So this is in lieu of our budget. We're just going to increase our protection.
Deputy, I also had it listed that you might be also looking at thermal imaging cameras. I don't know if that's changed.
It hasn't changed. We're looking, we're getting prices. We haven't officially
Acknowledged. Oh, that's
acknowledged
fine.
them. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I know.
We're looking to replace the thermal imaging camera on ladder 2, which is a 1995, I think, thermal imaging camera. And we're looking to go to newer technology, and we're also looking to add a new one to the squad, our new engine that you guys were so nice to give us.
Mm-hmm. The beautiful one, right? Obviously, I had alluded that, fire equipment is very important and extremely important for the protection and the well-being of our fire department. So having done the AFG grant, having done these equipment grants, it means an awful lot to your men and women that work in the department. So congratulations on being able, once again, to take another step in trying to provide both state-of-the-art resources, but more importantly, I think turnout gear, we all recognize, goes through a half-life pretty quickly, depending on how busy the department is. Which brings me to my third item on my manager's report, which is we had an extraordinarily, very concerning event this past week at the Clara Barton Elementary School, which occurred on January 20th, 2022. There had been a fire alarm that was sounded at the elementary school, and we had not only our fire department respond, but we had a number of area mutual aid support that had rushed to our scene as well. And I'll let the deputy speak to it. I know, as somebody who was on scene within a few minutes myself, when I had heard that the school had a credible fire at that time, a lot of smoke in the building. It was certainly a scene where all of our departments, our police department, our fire department, everything from our council on aging, everyone really, really pulled together. And it's almost to the point where it felt flawless, but yet it was really frightening, and it was frightening for the children who, were evacuated as quickly as possible from the building, but didn't have an opportunity to grab their coats, and it was freezing out that day. And so I'll let you kind of talk a little bit about it, because I hardly saw you. I was on the other side of the building, but I know you were in doing the investigation
I
with the
was working.
police, so. But I know the board was aware when we texted quickly to let them know that the children were at least safe, but it wasn't an easy thing to address.
It was really a perfect storm. And I don't use that term lightly. It's not often you actually get fires in a school. And we had a fire in the bathroom. But from the principal using the radio, calling fire alarm, to the teachers getting the kids out, the kids following everything that we teach them every year during Fire Prevention Week, going to their meeting places. One of the things that as the public educators, what we do in town is we work with the teachers to get them to have an accountability of their students. At the middle school, they actually have green and red cards. The teachers hold up a red card. I know they don't have everybody. They hold up a green card. I know that everybody's there. We haven't gotten that way in the elementary schools yet, but what we do is each teacher takes an accountability of their student. When I got to the front of Clara Barton, the principal looked at me and said, "We're all accounted for. All the kids, all the staff, everybody is out." It worked flawlessly, which it's nice to see that we've actually accomplished what we've set out to do at the schools. The fire was actually put out by a staff member. We got there, it was smoldering. There was some damage to one of the stalls. We did the investigation, whatnot. There's some damage to the ceiling. Fire alarm worked. Everything worked. Accountability. Our mutual aid company's coming in, changing over to our radio frequencies. Everything. It was flawless. So it was nice to see. Council on Aging brought their van up so that we could get some of the kids out of the cold weather. Once we knew that we had the fire knocked down, we were in the investigation stage. We were allowed to we brought the kids back into the gym and got them out of the weather because they didn't have their coats. But teachers closed all their classroom doors. All the windows were closed. Everything was. It was nice to see. And our mutual aid companies were great. We couldn't have done it without them.
And I do want to also acknowledge not just the principal, but our superintendent, Mike Lucas, was a great partner. And of course, Tony Sad,
Everybody.
with Chief Sad, excuse me.
Everybody, all the town departments, the building maintenance department was there right off the bat.
It worked.
It was a great response by townspeople and town employees all across the board.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right,
I
right.
just want to say I was sitting at home at the kitchen table doing some work on my computer when the call came in, and I have a scanner at my house, and I listen. And between the fire, the police, and all the mutual aid companies, the level of professionalism and the next thought process, it all happened very, very quickly, and I was extremely impressed. With the fire department showing up on scene. I believe you were clearing up from another fire call just
Yeah.
prior to that, to the police ensuring, additional mutual aid companies were able to have access to the road. Being a school in such a small community where many people do listen to the scanners, parents probably get notified pretty quickly and know of an emergency at the school and want to rush over to try and make sure their child is okay. So, kudos to the fire department for what they did and the police department for ensuring, keeping access for you. And then the professionalism on the radio. It was, I think it was worked out best for worst case scenarios. So, thank you.
Well, and, part of what we're trying to achieve too is to recognize that as we go into these winter months where we've had a lot of cold weather, there is an increase in call volume for people, related to trying to use their wood stoves more to keep their houses warm, pipe breaks and things like that. And then on top of that, we have, these kinds of things that become major incidents. I put in my manager's report to let the board know that not successively, one right after the other on the same date, but we have had several instances of weather-related events that have led to pipes bursting not that long ago in our police department and also at the Clara Barton Elementary School. And we also had it at the high school. And what we're finding is that when we have these really, really cold snaps, even if these pipes have been there for years and actually haven't let go, and sometimes it's not happening till actually the thaw part of the day is happening. But we've had several events, which is making us look at the whole architecture of the buildings. I've asked the DPW and the facilities maintenance to look at that because, obviously we don't want to continue to have potential damages that are done that, yes, we have insurance and we can have insurance coverage for that, but obviously I've worked very hard to drive down overall premiums for the town and get better insurance rates, so the less claims we have, the better. So I'm just bringing this to our attention because we are going to be looking at some additional technologies. I had talked with the DPW director, Jared Duval, prior to the last cold snap and the one before that about trying to actually have routine checks through the building. Of course, 24 hours is a long time period to do that. And I'm only mentioning this because we have a cold snap that's coming tomorrow evening where it's going to go down to 2. And we may have a bomb cyclone over the weekend. So rest up, all public safety, rest up, because I don't know what we're going to be doing over the next several days. But get yourself some good R&R. It's been a extraordinary week last week, and we appreciate everything you do. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you,
Thank
Ken.
you, Deputy.
The next item on my report is just to inform the board that an open meeting law workshop has been set to be held on February 15th at 6 p.m. We have Attorney Lauren Goldberg of KP Law Firm, who's a subject matter expert on the open meeting law, and will be presenting at the workshop. She's excellent. All boards, committees, and commissions and staff are highly encouraged to attend this informative workshop. I know Jennifer in my office has already, put the word out on the street, so to speak, for people to attend, and it should be very good and informative. Next item is cemetery pricing. It's not something we like to talk about all the time, is the cemetery. It's a nice place to visit, but it's a nice place to leave too, right? So the Cemetery Commission recently met and reviewed the surrounding town rates. They take their job very seriously. They're constantly looking to make sure that we maintain the wholeness of our cemeteries over time and that we can afford to keep them in the shape that they are in, and also still allow our residents to have a place of sanctuary to go on their final resting place. So the Oxford rates were adjusted last in 2019, and the Cemetery Commission had taken the position that the rates needed to be increased. They are not increasing for infant burials. The new prices are included in your packet, but I just thought it was important to let you know that another commission has actually gone through the, I think, difficult challenges of trying to come up with what they feel is a good rate for people in the community. They would be effective on January 1st. Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Did the
These the old ones or the new ones?
did the cemetery commission provide the price effects? What we have in our packet is effective.
I know it says
8/28/19.
2019. I did not put this in the packet, so I don't know if that was
Okay.
the old ones, or maybe they just didn't change that piece of it.
Okay.
We can find out, but
We'll look into it.
once we do that, we'll make sure that they're available, okay? That could be what had happened with them. That's what I know that I thought they had forwarded. And if it was in the, if it's in the header, they might not have changed the date.
Okay.
I'll find that out. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Winter Festival. What's really nice to report is that our community center is working very, very hard. Shelley Lambert, our director, and I had talked about trying to do, 4 full seasons of different events that are cultural, that bring people downtown and bring them to some of our other, municipal properties that would do something in a coordinated event. Obviously, our summer program is very successful in the fall. We've really launched having scarecrows on the common and movies on the main in the summertime. And so we talked about what could we do for a winter kind of event. And so I'm really pleased to say that on February 19th, we're going to be hosting the Fun, Frost, and Family Winter Festival. It has a whole bunch of great things that families will be able to take advantage of, starting out in the morning with, a polar plunge at Carbuncle Beach, along with ice skating, ice sculpture demonstrations. There'll be fire pits in a variety of different places. The fire department will be on hand. There will be an ice skating rink that is being set up by our DPW on the common, and that is, we have found out, going to be actually donated to the great extent by Aquarian Water. They're coming in with a $1,500 donation towards that. We have WXLO that's going to be on the common. There are a bunch of different activities. This flyer only captures a little bit of it. So as we go forward, there should be more things that will be happening, and I just think it'll be a great event, and we're going to just, I don't know, with this bomb cyclone, we should have some snow on the ground perhaps, and maybe we can actually go sledding down the hill at Carbuncle. That would be terrific. So I just want to say there's some great activities, and Shelley is putting an awful lot of effort into it, and we also are still mindful about COVID. And so some of these events are trying to make them family-friendly and with the mindset of making sure that we keep people also virus-free. The next item is to alert the board about the fact that this did come. It's very exciting and very heavy. This is our GFOA award. I'm pleased to say that Distinguished Budget Presentation Award have finally arrived. They did say it would take up to 8 weeks for it to get here. Again, this is a truly, a shared success. It's taken a huge amount of effort and more than a year's worth of work to put together the document, to get the acknowledgement, particularly in the areas of financial assessment, auditing, bonding, and agency compliance. And we are going to put it in a prominent place in Town Hall, right above our Boston cane, post cane, and between the clerk's and the assessor's office, so that people know that we are taking our finances, we always have, but we're stepping it up to be competitive with best practices, which is what the grant was. So we're very proud of that, and I just wanted to share that. When it came in a box, I was like, what the heck is in here? And then opened it up, and it was a nice surprise a couple days ago. So the next item is to let you know COVID test kits. This, I wanted to bring to the board's attention. We have a lot of things that go along in departments, and we were lucky to be considered one of 102 communities across the Commonwealth of being a high-need community in which we received over 2,000 COVID test kits. Now, when I tell you how difficult it is to think about trying to get those out right before Christmas and through the holidays, I just have to give such an acknowledgement to our new Director for Public Health, Rika Starrett, for really pulling together at least a half a dozen events up at the Housing Authority, up at Orchard Hill, at our senior center, over at the community center, you name it, they made themselves available. And when I tell you they were very, very well received, even after we had made modifications to who could receive them, and then eventually opened it up to the whole public after we did the seniors and after we did those of financial need and hardship. We, had worried with the police presence, needing them to guide traffic to the senior center on the weekends. These people made themselves available on weekends to try to get this done. And we have one more event that's coming up where we have to hope to be able to distribute the last of about a couple hundred testing kits. And it was going to be scheduled for Saturday. They moved it to Sunday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., depending on how much snow we really get. Hopefully it'll, continue to happen. But I just wanted to let the board know that it was really significant to the residents of this town. The residents that came in were so grateful, and couldn't believe it. And when I tell you how many other communities that didn't get these were really, really actually very disappointed. And oftentimes, the fire department and the boards of health and everybody was getting called, do you know where we can get testing kits? So it was significant, and I think that, good for the departments that have worked together to make it happen, and that included all of the different places that I had expressed. So hats off to them again. On a lighter note, we are having, while they're having this winter festival in February, the same day, we're trying to do something that might also appeal to our seniors and creative folks who don't like the snow and don't want to go outside and can't do that. And that is a succulent garden workshop that they're going to have at the community center. And it's going to be held again on the February 19th. There's a pre-registration requirement. You go online, and if you look in your packets, it really is a nice thing. We are going to do a couple of raffle donations for seniors so that they'll be able to create these beautiful little terrarium gardens that are made with succulent botanicals. So that ought to be nice. And then the final part of my report is just to give the COVID-19 update. Public health nurses have shown, again, a significant spike that we had witnessed in the month of December, and also has continued to come through the month of January. If you look at December's figures from last year, these are the ones that actually have gone through PCR testing and through the state system, not the ones who are testing at home and being positive. So we definitely don't even have the full extent of numbers. But last December, we had 336 positive COVID cases. This December, 422. And you can see through the weeks of January 1st to the 8th, there was over 328 cases. And then we have a slight dip down, 293 cases in the week of January 9th through the 15th. And obviously, you can see the largest number of cases, again, are in the 30 to 49 year age range, in the 50 to 64 year range. So once again, we continue to encourage people to be vaccinated. We're still not out of the woods with this, but we're starting to see a trend down, which is great. And we're all looking forward once again to going back to a time where we don't wear masks. I certainly am. But in the meantime, again, thank you to our public health nurses, working days, nights, and weekends, keeping people in the loop and explaining and answering a lot of their questions that they have. And that would conclude my manager's report.
Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is going to be the Board of Selectmen Professional Development, Code of Conduct webinar, and possible discussion. Just, give a little background before we go into the webinar. Again, this is just general professional development for the board. There was a draft policy that was presented a while back. It was a very controversial point in town, with great misunderstanding, I feel. To the point, so a code of conduct policy, we're going to learn about it tonight in the webinar. Our town insurance company actually supports and encourages an implementation of a comprehensive code of conduct policy. So what I'm saying there is that we can get credit, maximum 3% credit with our insurance company if we had one in place. Tonight, there's no draft policy in front of any of the board members. There are examples in your packet from other towns that have code of conduct policies. Tonight, we're just going to watch the webinar. The webinar is presented by the Massachusetts Select Board Association. After the webinar, we can have discussion in regards to a future possible potential code of conduct, but there will be no votes taken tonight in regards to a code of conduct. So again, just general professional development.
How
in
long is
regards
this
to-
one?
It's just about an hour long.
An hour?
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jill Hay. I am the Select Board Chair in Lexington and the MSA Second Vice President. And I want to thank everyone for attending today. We have over 500 people registered for this webinar, which will be a training on codes of conduct for town boards and committees. Our featured speaker today will be Regina Ryan, the founder and president of Discrimination and Harassment Solutions, LLC. Ms. Ryan practiced law at Lewis and Costello Condo and Pfaff for 26 years, specializing in employment litigation. In addition to her litigation experience, Ms. Ryan completed multiple MCAD certified training courses for conducting investigations and trainings related to discrimination or harassment in the workplace. She also holds the ATIXA Civil Rights Investigator Level 2 certification for Title IX investigations. Ms. Ryan will also be joined today by Sandwich Town Manager Bud Dunham, who will be moderating the session and offering some of his own insights on the subject. A few housekeeping items before we get started. A recording of today's webinar, along with the PowerPoint slides, will be sent to all registrants within a few days of the live event. So if you're not able to attend this live, you will still be able to view it on demand or share it with your other board members. We please ask that you type questions into the Q&A section, as we will not be able to take verbal questions today, and the chat will not be able to be monitored for questions. Today's training will be eligible for MIA rewards. And now I am going to turn it over to Regina. Thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me present today. This topic is so hot. As many of you know, I do investigations across the state for municipalities. And I can tell you in the past year, I would say I've got between 6 and 8 investigations for board members, for appointed officials, for exhibiting poor behavior in the workplace. So Bud and I talked, and we've discussed the policy that we think that would be appropriate to share with everyone in the importance of having a policy for a code of conduct for boards. So when I get calls from municipalities to do investigations, generally it'll be an HR member or a town administrator, town manager, and they'll be panicking. They'll say, we just got a complaint from a staff member. He or she is alleging a hostile work environment against one of our elected or appointed officials. What can we do? What can we do? Everyone knows that an elected official can't be disciplined. So what can we do? Do we have any recourse, or how do we protect our staff or the public or whoever feels that they've become a victim of bad behavior by an elected or appointed official? And I have to say, the climate right now in the country, and the usage of Zoom, and the increased audiences watching these meetings, people, their behaviors have been, they've been demonstrating some poor behavior. When I review the tapes, when I get from these clients, people are yelling and screaming. I mean, the behavior really is concerning. So I usually say, well, do you have a policy? In the majority of the towns that I speak to, they really don't have a policy for their elected officials. They'll have their general personnel policies, but they don't necessarily apply to their board, elected or appointed officials. There are 2 policies in my experience as an investigator that I highly recommend. I recommend that everyone have the anti-harassment and anti-discrimination policy for their board members, but I also recommend that we have a code of conduct policy. So I'm just going to pull up some slides here. This is usually the hardest part for me. So what I've done is I've just put some slides together to talk about a code of conduct policy specifically that each town could consider. The anti-harassment, anti-discrimination policy that you will be receiving a copy of in the next couple of days is basically one that's adopted by the MCAD. So that one, you can tweak it a little bit to customize it for your city or town, but that one's pretty straightforward. The code of conduct policy is a little bit different because with each town, you may have a bylaw or a charter or something else that will control the actions of a particular board, maybe one board, maybe all your boards. There may be other things in place. So for both of these policies, I urge you that before you implement them or before you have them adopted as a whole, that you work with Labor Council on customizing it specifically for your particular organization. So just talking about the code of conduct policy, the things that I find to be important is that it must let everyone know that it's, a policy that's covered all elected officials and all appointed officials in their actions when they're acting on behalf of the town. I feel like in the recent past, people don't realize that, they're on a Zoom call for a meeting and they're in their living room or, in their kitchen, and they get much more comfortable and they start speaking a little bit more inappropriately than maybe we had in the past. And also they need to recognize that their behaviors have to be appropriate, not only at these board meetings, right? But when they're sending emails to the town manager or the town administrator, or when they're communicating by email with the general public. And so they have to understand that it's not just their behavior at their board meeting, it's their whole presentation when they're working on behalf of the town. In the policy that you will be receiving, I recommend that the town clerk be responsible for sending a copy of this code of conduct policy and this anti-harassment policy at the time of each appointment, and then after every reappointment or re-election. That way it can be documented that everyone's received the policy and signed off on it. Bud and I will talk in a little bit about when you do get somebody on your board that refuses to sign off on it, and things, ideas that we have had experience that maybe you can consider to try and get more and more people to sign off on these policies. And again, we've tried to incorporate a lot of the policies that are floating out there within the municipalities. They're all pretty similar, but we tried to add a little bit more about including electronic communications into these policies to remind elected officials and board members that their behaviors when they are on social media can impact their role as an elected official. We all recognize that everyone has their First Amendment rights, and I'm not in any way trying to step on those. But I have had to do investigations where an elected official will post something on a website that's deemed to be harassing, discriminatory, and therefore the town would be compelled to conduct an investigation. So those are some of the ideas of things that would be included generally in most, at all policies. But then I do want to remind you that you should proceed with caution because, like I said earlier, there are some statutory provisions for certain roles, for certain boards and certain committees, bylaws, town charters. So every municipality probably will have its own unique code of conduct policy if it is done correctly. So just by way of example, there are some boards and commissions, such as the Board of Health, that's controlled by a certain statute, or the Conservation Commission. And even like the Zoning Board of Appeals, that talks about any member may be removed for cause by the appointing authority upon written charges and after a public hearing. So there are some due process implications when you try to discipline somebody on the board or take action. So those, again, that's why I do recommend everyone discuss their policies with Labor Council. Now, when we talk about the Code of Conduct policy, the critical areas that I think that each policy needs to address, and these examples of these will be raised in the policy that I will be sharing with you, is, talk about your behaviors as you relate to the community, right? So we want to make sure that everyone's behavior when they're at their meetings, when you're on these Zoom meetings and you're communicating with the public, that you are serving the best interest of the public, and you want to show the respect and dignity to the members of the community. But where I've seen a real challenge lately is with regard to elected and appointed officials' behaviors towards each other. Now, when I get called in to do an investigation, the evidence of the bad behavior will come out in these reported tapes, and I'll watch them, and people will just be screaming at each other, swearing, making physical threats, and it's all recorded. It's extremely problematic behavior. So in the end game, it really makes for a much less productive town. Also, with the relation to the town manager and town administrator, this has also become a greater problem. It's particularly where I feel like elected officials, they're trying to almost do the job of the town manager. They're intervening with personnel, which is extremely problematic. And in some instances, they're, stepping on the toes of the town manager and trying to embarrass the town manager in front of the public or in front of staff. And all that behavior really would be deemed unacceptable and should be included in the code of conduct policy. And lastly, which I think is the most problematic, is how elected and appointed officials relate and interact with staff, because that's where I see the greatest problems for the town. Because if you have a staff member that brings a claim and alleges that they're being bullied, they're being sexually harassed, they're being discriminated against, being treated unfairly by an elected appointed official, the town then is on the hook for the actions of these individuals. And that's where I personally, in my investigation, see the most problems arising. So then, as we said before, there are issues with, enforcement of these policies. Can the individual be disciplined? What other measures can we take to get people to act better during these meetings? Now, that's separate and distinct from what can be investigated, okay? So a town can investigate bad behavior, but may not be able to take corrective action against the individuals if they exhibited bad behavior. That's right, it's critical that a code of conduct policy be in place to say, because what's the scope of the investigation? Did you violate the code of conduct policy? Again, at the end of the investigation, you might say, yeah, Gina Ryan violated the code of conduct policy, but what action can we take against her? It may not be, we can't give me a suspension if I'm an elected official, but there are some ideas that Bud and I will talk about in a few moments of addressing that and making it so that the work environment is better for everyone, for the employees, the community, and for the members of the committee. But I have to say, if there is an allegation of discrimination, harassment, a hostile work environment, any of those buzzwords, I highly recommend that your policy state that the town shall investigate, not that the town manager or town administrator should not seek approval from any other board. The town administrator should be able to make that decision on his or her own, that if there is an allegation of discrimination by anyone against an elected or appointed official, it's an automatic investigation, because you have to do that to be in compliance with the MCAD. Now, with regard to the code of conduct, that's, I'm not as strong on that, right? So the language that I put in the policy that I'm proposing for you is that the town manager or town administrator may investigate code of conduct violations. So, but again, investigation is different than, disciplining, but everything should be investigated, because most importantly is that if this went any further, we would want to show that the town tried to take action, that they addressed the employees or the public's concerns, and the town did everything that it could do to make the situation better by investigating it, by making recommendations to the employee, by providing training and doing other things along those lines. The greatest concern is that there can be liability to the town for the actions of your board members, and the individuals can find themselves liable. But the greatest impact that all of this bad behavior has on it really hurts the town, it hurts the employees, and it's really, I can see the damage that is being done in many municipalities that really is unnecessary. So just briefly, I'm going to talk about some recent trends that I've seen, and then Bud and I will jump into our little dialogue. So bullying behavior towards staff. Just so everyone understands, anyone that's an elected official or an appointed official that's watching this today, the impact that you have on employees, you probably have no idea. When I do these investigations and someone says to me, I felt like, the chairman of the select board, made me uncomfortable and harassed me, they are in tears. People are saying, I can't even go to work anymore because I'm so scared that the select person's going to come into my office and look over my shoulder and see what I'm doing. I've had people, have to take leave of absences because you're elected, you're a representative of the town, and they look up to you in that way. And it really takes a toll on them. And then when someone raises their voice on them, it really, really does have a horrible impact on the people. In the towns that I'm investigating, in the cities that I'm investigating right now, the staff turnover is incredible. And every person I interview says, my resume's out there. I am looking because either this person on the board is so horrific or this appointed individual treats the staff so horrible and no one can do anything about it. So it really makes for an unproductive staff and brings down the town. Again, I don't think everyone realizes that what a pattern that I'm definitely seeing is I see a lot of female department heads who go in front of a board or a committee and get treated very poorly. And they feel that there is a difference between the way female department heads are being treated compared to the way male department heads are being treated, and they're bringing claims of gender discrimination. So a board member may think, hey, I'm just, I'm going to show the public, I'm going to challenge the director of finance here and make that person show me the numbers. And not realizing that their behavior is being perceived as discriminatory based on somebody's gender. So that's an awareness that you should have. And as I do in all my trainings, it's really your behavior has to be consistent, right? So you can't treat, you really should keep your questions and your tone consistent across the board. But most importantly, just be respectful because, you're an elected official, people are listening to you, they're nervous in front of you, and to get screamed at, the perception of what your intent is really can make them truly believe that they are being subject to discrimination or unlawful harassment in the workplace. I've seen as a result, staff get so frustrated by the behaviors of their board members that then they're reporting them to the Attorney General's office for ethics violations, for a multitude of reasons. They're reporting them to the MCAD. So I really encourage everyone to watch behavior and really encourage that we really try to be as respectful as possible when we're working with staff, even when you're working with the public, anyone. But right now, the staff are a hotbed issue, and people are really, really upset. Again, the other behaviors that I see is the bullying. Elected and appointed officials, where they're yelling, screaming, swearing. You're not serving the best interests of the public. That oath that you took that you would serve the best interests of the public, it's just not being accomplished. And you do, in my opinion, in my observations on my investigation, there is a loss of public trust. So those are some recent trends, and I think it might be a good time to segue over to Bud to talk about any disrespecting of town administrators and town managers, as he is the town administrator for the town of Sandwich, and any thoughts, Bud, that you might have to share on that.
Great, thanks, Gina. I know in preparing for today, you and I spoke several times, and we tried to break up our comments into things just dealing with the code of conduct in general, but then also how boards of selectmen interact with their town manager and administrator, how they deal with staff, the totally unique things that we all have to deal with in terms of our interactions with the public that really isn't anything like a private business has to go through. And then I know at the end we have some general wrap-up issues as well. And I think one of the things we wanted to stress is, one size doesn't fit all. We tried to pick some hot topics or things that we've observed through our careers on what works and what doesn't, maybe what causes the most problems and how we might be able to make things better moving forward. So I think one of the things that we always stress is if an issue like this comes up, make sure you review your policies, consult your town council, consult your labor council, and if needed, bring in external consultant advice. But maybe first, just in terms of general about codes of conduct with boards and committees. So Sandwich is fortunate we've had a code of conduct that the selectmen adopted about a decade ago, and then an issue arose with the board that was a little bit difficult to go through, but we worked through it. And then because of that, we actually amended the code of conduct about 5 years later. And so, as you've stressed, Gina, it's not like personnel policies where it's easy to say this covers all staff. It's a little bit harder when you're dealing with elected and appointed boards. But I guess one of the things I'd ask you, what's the importance of the selectmen adopting, such a policy as a code of conduct and supporting it publicly?
So where I see the importance of that is if you as a body adopt this policy, right, then you can control the behavior. So the chairman could say, or the chairperson could say, hey, Gina Ryan's behavior was out of control tonight. Look, we all signed the code of conduct policy. Gina, you're clearly in violation of it. So within that board, the behaviors can be addressed and they can be corrected. Some things that I've seen some chairs do is if they see bad behavior and there is a policy in effect and they say, Gina, you violated our code of conduct policy, I'm going to ask you to go to an additional training on discrimination in the workplace. I'm going to ask you to attend a training on anger management. In Maya, I know not all towns are insured by Maya, but a lot of you are. Maya offers a lot of these services, a lot of these trainings. And if you talk to your risk management individual, they can work with you on getting these services that might help, like, you know, how to deal with anger management. Or, you know, there's a bunch of different trainings that the chair could recommend a particular member go to. The other thing is if the board has adopted the policy, is the chair could say, look, I know you head the X committee within our board. Because of your behavior, I'm not going to reappoint you to that committee, or your behavior is so egregious, I'm going to pull you off that role, or I'm going to take you off that position. So there's some internal controls within each board when there is a code of conduct signed off by these members. So there's a little bit more control there.
I think one of the things you touched on is it's a little bit unique in municipal government where a board of selectmen might be the chief executive officers of the town. But even committees that they appoint annually, advisory committees, aren't always beholden to what their beliefs are or, you know, direct oversight of. And then you throw in, usually, most of us have several regulatory boards that might be separately elected. So, you know, how would you try to get buy-in from those volunteers that serve on those other boards?
Right, and that is the trickiest question, right? Because, yeah, Gina Ryan could say, hey, I'm not signing that. Why would I sign that? I'm not signing that. And there's really, again, there's nothing anyone can do to require it. So you would want, hopefully, the chair and the vice chair to, you know, start the behavior, to lead at the top, to show that it is in the best interest of everyone. And then, you know, I think once everyone starts to sign off on it, and, you know, if they see others, there is more and more people generally are willing to do that. You are going to probably be confronted with a few that won't. The policy will have a form attached to it where you sign off and just document that the person refused, you know, refused to sign. But again, if you at least do that, then you are protecting the town to show that the town did take action, the town, you know, attempted to correct this, or to put these plans in place to protect staff, to protect the public, and to protect the other members of the board.
And then maybe, you know, once a town has a code adopted, how often do you think they should review and update it? And, you know, what are the best ways to disseminate that information to board and committee members?
Like you just said, but like 5 years ago, you said you had to change your policy. And even like preparing for this training, when I was looking over the policies that a lot of the towns use, a lot of it didn't include the, you know, social media, electronic communications, which, I mean, we probably are a little behind. So that is all added. So, you know, I think with each incident, you may end up tweaking the policy. But most importantly is if the town clerk does hand it out with every appointment and with every reappointment in election or re-election. I think that's the safest way because then it's consistent. And again, I recommend the town clerk distribute both the harassment policy and the code of conduct, because that really encompasses all the behaviors that we'd want to control, you know, with the elected and appointed officials.
I guess before I jump into some of those issues with, you know, selectmen and managers, selectmen and staff, I think one of the things that makes our jobs unique is the public nature of what we all do. So I think it's fair to say when something does go wrong, you know, whether it's a local or regional paper or all the different media outlets, there's just sort of a field day, and they sort of sense and strike when things aren't going well. So there's a lot of examples in the news about, you know, what can go wrong and how fast. So one of the things that I think we've talked about is a code of conduct would at least help us identify how to address these issues and sort of have a roadmap. You know, bring it hopefully to a head and to correct the relationships. And I know, because we've known each other for 15 plus years, like, for lack of a better word, you've had to deal with some of the most difficult public things or titillating things that we've seen in the state. You've been the person that's investigated it and whose name appears in the paper. So do you have any advice to all of us on how we should respond when something goes wrong, or if the press is hounding a staff member or especially a board member for a particular reason?
Sure. So having litigated for 26 years, I say punt to your labor council or to your town council, because why would you want to put that on you? I mean, as elected officials, I mean, you can't speak about personnel. There's so many things that you can't speak about, your deliberations, you know, pending litigations, things that you may not even realize as an elected official that you can't talk about. So I would highly recommend that is an area where labor council, defense council, or town council should automatically be called in, and I would refrain from engaging in any of those communications because I don't see an upside to it.
And I think one of the things that we've all shared is that the story makes a lot of publicity, but the resolution, which is usually hopefully a positive outcome, never gets as much publicity, but that's sort of what we all deal with in the public sector. I guess one of the things we've both seen an increase in, especially lately, is a rise in public record requests. It seems to be focused on whenever the public or a neighborhood is unhappy about something that's going to their part of town, or you know, a business that hasn't been successful is now going to be replaced by one that will be successful, and people worry about traffic and other things. So how about with public record requests? Like, how important is that for board and committee members to, you know, to realize the importance of that and to be careful in what they say?
Right. I agree with you, Bud. I can't believe when I sometimes talk to like labor council or town council, the amount of hours that they are spending going through emails and redacting them, you know, if it's a personnel matter or a pending litigation, but the amount of public records requests are really off the charts. I have one, you know, I've seen people make fake names for municipalities on multiple investigations that I'm doing, and they will submit these lengthy public requests, and a lot of them relate to personnel, you know, and they want to find out what personnel are doing and what the, you know, town manager said, communications that they had with this department head, and, you know, they're using them, you know, to try and catch staff doing things or catch up the town manager. So that's one component of the public records that is just, you know, startling at this time. But the other thing is everything you record, all those emails, you know, they are discoverable. They're going to have to be produced, and you really, it gets embarrassing. You know, when I've seen many people embarrassed by what they've written, and their weapons that can be used against you down the road in circumstances. So I caution you, you know, and my advice to you is this: don't write anything unless you're comfortable with a jury of 8 staring at you while it's being read to a jury, because there's a good chance that your emails that you prepare as an elected or appointed official are going to be produced at some point, and I just encourage you to be aware of what you write.
I just add, that's a lesson I've had to learn personally on a couple of cases that we've had. Because it's just common nature when you're communicating with department heads about, say, a difficult applicant or project. You can be pretty blunt with each other, and then it sort of comes back to haunt you when you have to read that in front of a judge. But
So
one of the
true.
things that I would just give people advice on that we've done in Sandwich that's worked really well, when someone becomes a Board of Selectmen member, instead of using their personal email, we actually set up an official town email address, and that's the only way we communicate with the board. That way, if public records requests come in, it's easier for our IT director to sort those and get those ready. And I would just caution people, please check with your IT staff or your consultant, because for network security purposes, they really have to be comfortable with doing that. But it's something we found locally that has helped. And now I guess we'll jump into just speaking, I think for others, colleagues, that one of the most difficult things for any manager to do is when the board that he or she reports to is not getting along or having issues with each other. So it's difficult, you know, for an appointed person who has multiple elected bosses to try to sort of navigate through different personalities, different issues that the board may be dealing with. And so one of the things that I think I've been taught through the years that I've tried to pass along too is one of the best advice for managers is, if the selectmen are really upset with each other, we have to be really careful not to get in the middle of that. You can try to help within reason, you can try to explain things to either side, but to truly get in the midst of it is really difficult. And it definitely helps having some external experts intervene. And I know you and I talked about that could be town council, labor council. You had a great advice on Maya or whoever any community's liability carrier is. Oftentimes they work with people like yourself, Gina, or others that specialize in this and can really step in. And I think sometimes having someone from the outside try to smooth the waters works better than when we do it on our own.
I agree.
And then any advice, like when the selectmen aren't getting along, what should the manager do?
I think, but you just said it best. If they're struggling amongst the board, I would avoid getting involved. I mean, I've seen town administrators and town managers get, beaten up so badly, they look like they just got, taken down, or I've seen them become counselors, therapists for board members. I mean, you wear many hats as an administrator, as a manager. Because you do develop relationships over time, because it is a close working relationship and it's an important role. But if the board is, challenging amongst the board, I recommend that the town administrator, town manager, stay out of it as best they can. But again, utilize other resources, bring in a third party to mediate if that's necessary. Because the worst thing is to let these issues, these problems, breakdowns in relationships fester. They need to be hit head on and quickly, because I've seen so many towns where it just drags on and drags on and drags on. And when I was litigating, it would be like, oh gosh, yeah, that town again. Of course it is. That board, they just can't get it together. They can't get along. So I would leave the town manager, town administrator out. I would really, I think that if you're going to be chair or vice chair, you have to take that role seriously. You're in control of getting your board in control, and you need to tap into any resources you can to get yourself back in order and back as, in a board that can appropriately, run the town.
I think that's really good advice, to try to work through the chair. And if that person happens to be one of the people that is, in a difficult situation, then work through the vice chair as best we can. And I think one thing you always stress is communicate with each other. One of the things when we were going through some difficult issues here a decade or so ago, I think the board felt that they were disagreeing with each other on everything. And we went back and looked, and literally 95+% of the votes of the board from the prior year were 100% unanimous. And it's almost like those one or two hot button topics that there may have been stronger differences of opinion on carry over into other things, when in reality, most of the things that we do for the greater public good, usually aren't that controversial and have the full support of the board. So that's, one thing I tried to do is remind them that, yeah, there's a couple of things where we've had issues, but from the bigger picture perspective, we're all trying to row in the same direction and get things accomplished for the good of the town. Another one of the items that we talked about is really one of the hardest things to address, and that's, what do you do when an individual select board member acts on their own, either tries to give advice or direction to a department head, or where, I think as you hinted, where I've seen it even worse is when it's with a subordinate of a department head outside the proper chain of command. So obviously it sends mixed messages. I think one thing that those board members sometimes don't realize, it creates animosity with their fellow board members, because hey, in Sandwich, we get together on Thursday nights. At a Thursday night meeting, we talked about this and this was the direction we gave. Now someone's going rogue a little bit. That upsets the other board members, and many times I don't think the members always understand that, working as part of a board is the best way to go. Set that policy direction, support your administrative staff to carry it out, and try to stay out of the direct involvement with town staff. I think one of the things I was going to mention before I ask you a question is I've been blessed in Sandwich for a long time to have a very supportive Board of Selectmen who really allows myself, the assistant town manager, and our department heads to run the daily operations of the town. And so it gives us confidence to make decisions quickly, to change direction when we have to, obviously to go to the board on the bigger issues and to keep them informed. But probably the best example I can give is when we knew COVID was headed our way, we established a team of 8 that grew to 10. And many of these people, health director, public health nurse, the school superintendent, they're not usually on our emergency management group. On the Cape, we deal a lot with storms coming up at the coast and other things. So we involved a lot more people, but we always knew we had the full support of the board. So we were able to be really decisive about when to send town staff home, when to bring them back. We've been back in our offices since the day after Memorial Day last year. All sorts of testing programs. It's been really safe. I know if we didn't have that known confidence that the board was backing us up, that would have been a lot harder for us to do things. So any thoughts that you have on proper chains of command for daily operations, and what to do if the organizational structure is not respected or followed?
Sure. It's interesting your perspective because you work directly with the board, right? So you can see board members getting disgruntled if someone goes rogue. I don't see that side of it because I get called in really to hear the employee's complaint or the town manager's complaint, and then just the one individual board member. So it's interesting to see your perspective on that. But what's central to all of this is that the town administrator or the town manager needs to be the person that is the liaison between the board and the staff. The board elected officials cannot be jumping down to department heads, subordinates, to anybody. Any communications, any documents, information that an elected official or board member may want or need for their role should go directly through the town administrator and town manager. It's the cleanest way to do it. It keeps the chain, the way it should be going. It shows the board respects the town administrator or manager, who then goes to the employees. When you start bypassing that, that's when problems arise. And the other reason why I find that so concerning is people don't, a lot of times I'll see somebody's on a board, on a board of select person, say, right? And they're like CEO of a company and they're doing this part-time job. But then they're jumping down to these employees as if they're their own employees within their organization. And they don't even realize how they're speaking to this person. Like, I want this now. Like, I want you to print this. I want you to run this. I want this, because that's their role in their other life. And so their presentation, their demeanor is jarring for this person who's just, trying to do their job every day. So for that reason, but just for the board members themselves, you really can subject yourself to liability once you start crossing that line and going over to these employees. Your behavior and your perception of your behavior can be construed to be harassing, unlawful, and many other things. So most critical is have all communications go through town manager, town administrator, and then I think things do go much smoother. If there is an issue with the town administrator, I'm not sure if we've talked about that, if the board does have issues, and I've seen this where they're frustrated with their town manager or town administrator, they feel like, hey, this person's not strong enough, they should be more, demanding of these employees, and address that with the town administrator. Address that at their annual performance evaluation, or bring that up in private. Don't let the employees hear that. Don't address that with the employees. Don't address that to the public. Address it to the town administrator and start having that individual, have to be on a performance evaluation plan, or but don't pass that chain of command off.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about communicating, because if, as the chief administrator, if I'm not doing what the board feels, is a good job, I want to know that. I want to know what I could do to make things better. But also, if they don't want me here, I'd also want to know that too. So I think that open line of communication works really well for everyone, and hopefully you work on your relationship with the board and vice versa, so that's able to happen. I know this isn't sort of tied into what we just talked about, but I think one of the common themes that you and I have seen in communities, and we can all probably think of them in our own region, where there's constant turnover, There's many towns that I'm aware of where whether they're changing their municipal leadership constantly, their department heads aren't there for a long time, and it seems one of the threads that sort of run through those is, at times elected official involvement in daily operations outside of the proper chain. So I can't stress how important that is, and trying to work as a group, as colleagues with the manager working with the board, and then hopefully the manager carrying that down with the board, with the department heads. And I think one of the things you and I wanted to touch on, not just selectmen, but I'm sure there's a lot of other board or committee members other than selectmen on the webinar. And that's one of the things that we know that, literally, those people have no authority over staff whatsoever in most of our communities, unless there's some strange provision of the town charter. Even if they're elected, they have no authority over the town staff. So that's another thing that, I think we've both seen recently, is that can lead to issues with board members who think they're the boss of a department head who staffs their meetings, once every few weeks. But really, they don't have any authority of trying to tell that person what to do, or they may act inappropriately towards a staff member at a public meeting. And I guess as a manager, I would stress to my colleagues, that's where we should step in and buffer the staff whenever it's warranted. But, any words of wisdom that you could provide, when a committee member may overstep their bounds and create issues for staff that really they don't have any control over?
Sure, and again, I go back to my two things. One, it needs to be nipped in the bud, because you're going to see morale drop and you're going to see employees leave. Secondly, I defer to the chair to address that individually directly, particularly if you have the code of conduct, because that is going to be spelled right out in the code of conduct, that the relationships with staff are really off limits, that they need to go through the town administrator and they need to go through the town manager. But again, so if the chair or vice chair or, even any individual member of the board observes this behavior and finds it problematic, at least they can advance the code of conduct policy that's been signed by all to have it enforced. Now, you as town manager, any town managers or town administrators that see this behavior, if the board isn't taking action against this individual, then the town may intervene, and that's where it does say on the code of conduct policy that we've put together that the town administrator may move if it's code of conduct violation, or must move if it's a sexual or discriminatory harassment policy violation, to investigate. Again, you may not be able to discipline them, or you may not be able to take specific action against them, but at least you're investigating it, because that's your duty to the employee, that you will investigate claims of harassment against them.
And then how about if you're a staff person and you have issues with what a committee member has done, what should that person do? Who should they reach out to?
So the anti-harassment policy will spell it right out, that you should go to, generally it's the director of HR, right? But they really, if they even report it to their department head, then their department head is a supervisor and should be on notice to report that to HR. If HR isn't going to address it, go to the town administrator or town manager. But any employee should either feel comfortable going to their department head, HR, or the town administrator or town manager.
I think one of the things that we talked about that you've had to deal with more recently is, what things either selectmen or other board and committee members have done as it relates to the appointment of staff that have caused you to have to get involved.
Yeah, so, HR, particularly with this year with COVID, has become one of the most challenging jobs out there, right? And it's only getting more and more complicated. So I always get concerned when board members, or people with no experience in HR or, hiring practices and whatnot, are then going to interview people to make appointments and to question people about hiring practices. I've seen so many questions that make me cringe that board members will ask potential appointees or candidates because they put the hat on like they're, HR personnel, saying to a woman, are you sure you can do the job with 4 kids at home? Off limits. Shouldn't be asking those questions. So I do get concerned with any individuals that don't have experience in interviewing or communicating during an HR type process, if you are going to participate on these appointments, to do final interviews of them, work with HR in advance. If there's some great question that you want to ask, just ask HR in advance if these questions are appropriate, but work hand in hand with HR when you conduct these interviews and these questionings of the potential candidates.
One of the things I know we've all seen is the public can be very difficult, demanding, and at times totally unreasonable. So I think one of the things we wanted to address is try to set a good example as a board or committee member. It may help when the public is being disrespectful. Try to calm the waters as best you can, but if not, we may have to do things. I know you had mentioned if someone's on a Zoom call and someone's not behaving, have the person that's overseeing the Zoom call mute that person. There's different things we could do. One of the things I noticed, and I'm not trying to be funny, I've seen, in my 30 plus years in Sandwich, I've had to deal with way more mental health issues from the public, probably in the last 3 to 5 years than all the years prior combined. So I think that's really difficult when you have people who clearly have mental issues. But also there's so many different venues to rant these days, public meetings, local newspapers, and especially social media, which is its own beast that really didn't exist in the way it does today 10 plus years ago. So any advice that you have on board and committee members, like how should they act when a member of the public is at a public meeting, either making personal accusations or behaving irrationally or inappropriately?
So this does come up quite a bit, and I agree with you, Bud, that there has been an uptick in mental health issues becoming more apparent in town hall, in the library, at the Council of Aging, where people, are interacting with staff and with public employees. It's a challenge, and this is an area where I would highly recommend everyone enlist the services of town council or, labor council, but I've seen instances where we've had to ban people from town hall, which is, that's a real great restriction on someone's rights, right? So you really want to watch their due process rights to make sure that you're not stepping on that in any way. And that's why I encourage everyone to engage labor council or town council in doing this. But there are other ways. I had one case where someone kept harassing the conservation commissioner. Every day I'd come in and be screaming at the conservation commissioner. So we limited the time that he could come into town hall. He would have to come in by appointment only. He ultimately did file a claim against the city and alleged that it was discrimination based on his mental health disability. But then when we went to the MCAD for the investigatory hearing, he started screaming so loud at the commissioner at the MCAD that it was clear that his behavior could not be tolerated by this conservation commission individual within the city. So in that particular case, we banned the number of hours they could come in, or we would limit, require appointment only. The most dramatic one, though, is to do an all-right, no trespassing ban, and that's when it's really, really serious.
Yeah. And I guess two things to relay on our experience here in Sandwich. At times, if we know someone's been a little bit unbalanced at selected meetings and we know they're going to come again, it's always helpful to talk to the police department, and maybe they can have an officer stop by during the selected meeting that's just out on the road and not on a call. That's helped us in a couple of instances. And then I would just stress too, like we've had a couple of, threatening individuals that have really made the staff uncomfortable, that we've tried, as you said, as an issue of last resort, we've tried to work with to try to calm them down. And this is repeated 5 and 10 visits. And eventually, again, it really helps talking with the police chief and the administrative staff at the police department, because they usually deal with these individuals pretty frequently. And so I think in the last 18 months, we've had to post 2 people from town buildings. But I guess, again, it's something that you don't want to do lightly or do often, but at times you really need to look out for your people and protect the staff. They usually have a pretty good inclination of how they're dealing with, or how they're being dealt with. One of the things that I think we wanted to stress again at the end is that all board and committee members need to know that if the town staff receives a certain type of complaint, whether it's harassing or discriminatory behavior, we have to investigate it, regardless of any authority we may have over that committee. or member, we have to look into it. And it's, in that sense, it's quite similar and no different than if a town staff person wants to talk to, say, myself or the HR director confidentially. If they say certain things, we have to follow up and we tell them that. So, why, I think you've stressed it a little bit, but, why must towns look into allegations of impropriety, even though we may not have any direct authority over that committee?
Certainly, because number one, you want to show that the town has taken action, right? So if it's a staff person, if their complaint, so if it, like you said, if it's harassment, it has to get investigated, but if it's an impropriety under the code of conduct policy, and this person's reporting this and nothing gets done, that's certainly going to impact morale. And I have to say, even though in a lot of the situations that I've been retained to investigate, maybe the end game isn't that, the person, never is the person ever removed from the board, right? But there are measures that you can take. There are recommendations that can be made, say, training, like we said before, make them more accountable. And therefore, it does have an effect. And I do think, in my observations, it corrects the behavior of the people around them. Particularly when the allegations are then brought out into the public eye, right? So some of these investigations, the citizens are reading about this in the newspaper, and they're hearing this behavior that this elected official is exhibiting towards these employees. There's outrage there. So although in the end of an investigation, yeah, it may not say he or she's off the board or this or that, but it certainly, I think controls, it shows that the behavior is starting to get controlled. It corrects the behavior of others. It shows the citizens and the employees that the town has taken action. And then if there ultimately is a case filed against the town, at least the town can show that it did as much as it could in order to protect the interests of the employee, the public, or whoever it might be.
I think if things do get taken further and it goes to, say, a legal or an administrative hearing and judgment, what sort of judgments have you seen against the town on issues like this? And it's probably good to highlight where Maya or a liability carrier comes in and how helpful they can be.
Right. So my advice to anyone is when an issue is blowing up and it is becoming clear that an employee is extremely disgruntled and has, thrown hostile work environment, harassment, discrimination, every town really should put their insurance carrier on notice, right? Because at that juncture, the insurance company may say, fine, we're going to send in defense counsel, right? So then they're taking on the costs of the defense of the matter right at that point. Or they may just say, we're going to have defense counsel monitor that. So that's critical that, you put the insurance carrier on notice right away. The result, though, if a lawsuit actually does get filed, and it happens, you know what I mean? It is so ugly because, again, you're going to have emails coming out through discovery. There's so much finger pointing at everyone. There's so much division within the boards, amongst the staff, and amongst the public. So really, it is nowhere that anyone wants to be. And again, as we've said, the common theme throughout this presentation today is if everyone just tries to be a little bit more respectful, a little bit more aware of the impact that their behaviors might be having on their colleagues, on the staff, on the citizens, and takes a step back and tries to tone it down a little, you really can avoid, a lot of this. I mean, a litigation on some of these matters, no matter what, is going to come about, but I can tell you, none of you want to be there. None of you want to be up in federal court with the jury, reading your emails or critiquing, what you thought was funny. The other thing is, like, when I'm recently doing these investigations, because everything is on Zoom, I'll just I'll interview, I was recently interviewing an elected official. I said, do you raise your voice at the meeting? They were like, not really, sometimes, like, how do you speak to staff? Because this was a complaint involving staff. Oh, I'm extremely professional. I get along great with them. And I pulled up, like, this individual on a Zoom meeting, and they were, like, turning purple, screaming so loud, arms were flailing, F-bombs. And they, like, when I was interviewing them, I'm sure they were horrified that I had that and I'm investigating them. But they were absolutely horrified. Like, even said, like, wow, I didn't realize I was that bad. I don't think people sometimes realize the level of their behavior and their conduct. Because I think people get caught up in it. Everyone's yelling. You know what I mean? But then when you focus the yelling just on you or one individual, the behavior isn't good. So no one wants to end up in federal court. It's real, it happens. Again, put your insurance carrier on notice if you hear harassment, hostile work environment, threats, violence, anything like that, automatically put the insurance carrier on notice so they can get right in early on and hopefully guide the town on how to properly handle the situation. And like I said, when the public gets involved and when the public hears about it, it does tone, people start to correct their behavior. It really does have an impact on them. So that is why it is important to investigate these, and when it gets reported to the public and it's in the newspaper, the behaviors of everyone in that town, generally you will start to see better behavior.
And I would say too, like, things get so complex so quickly when they reach that higher level of, an adjudicatory proceeding. In Sandwich, there was a case years ago with the school committee and a former superintendent where the school committee prevailed on most of the charges, but there were others that were found in favor of the former superintendent, and the judgment by the time the interest was paid and everything was over $700,000. I mean, it's shocking.
Yeah.
And I would just add too, that I think when it comes to issues like this that we all have to investigate, I'm really lucky in Sandwich. Our Human Resources Director, Assistant Town Manager, Finance Director, extremely qualified, extremely experienced. We have the saying, there's not 2 sides to every HR matter, there's 10 sides. And when you get to a bigger department, there's probably 20. And just because of how we work with each other through the years, Gina, you have an uncanny ability to go into a cluster, sort of sift through all the mess and come up, and if you've ever seen one of Gina's reports, it's list what the facts are, and here's my judgment, and here's all the backup. It's really impressive how you can sort of sift through all that. So, and then lastly, just to wrap up, my sister's an HR director for a regional bank on Cape Cod, and she was trying to explore things about, what to do as they return staff to work and other things, and was doing some research, and she found this simple statement that GM had adopted for all their employees, whether you were an assembly line worker or someone in the corporate headquarters, and that was work appropriately. And so when I brought it back here and I talked to our central administrative team, we're like, geez, that's a simple but effective mantra, and it really sums up everything you're trying to cover with a code of conduct. It's like work appropriately with respect. It really applies to in-person work and remote work as well. I think we're all going to see requests from staff, or as we all figure out how we get back into the regular work environment, if we even are some departments, how's that all going to be handled? So, many of the issues that you're forced to deal with, could they disappear, if we all acted with a little bit more respect and work appropriately?
100%. I mean, that's the key to this whole thing, and it's just, I just think people need to be reminded. I don't think anyone really is like, hey, I am going to take this staff member down. But I think emotions were high with COVID, and it's a stressful position being in these elected and appointed positions within a municipality, and they want something and they want it right now, and they don't realize the impact of their personality that it can have on individuals. And I think if everyone takes a step back and really does make an effort to be more respectful in the workplace, the town's going to thrive. It'll be a much better organization for all.
And then just one last quick specific question. I think several of us will have to start dealing with requests from staff for more flexibility, more remote work, whether it's a couple days a week or even more extensive. Any thoughts about how we should consider those and handle them moving forward?
Yeah, so all along through the pandemic, I've been saying to everyone when I do my trainings, just be patient, just be patient. All these accommodations that you're going to, they're temporary. There's going to be, a time when none of these accommodations are going to be there. So err on giving accommodations during the pandemic. Well, now we are starting to come to the end. The EEOC, which is the federal counterpart to the MCAB, has issued some really good guidelines on the impact of, with the pandemic and the impact on harassment and discrimination claims. They have made it clear that working from home is not going to be an automatic accommodation for employees, right? So Gina comes into work tomorrow and says, but my doctor says I need to work from home permanently now because of my condition. I can say, hey, Gina, you know what, in the interactive process, instead, what we would like to do is we will give you a private office and you can conduct your work in that private office. So just because now everyone, before this, no one thought, every employer said, oh no, we can't work remote. Now the cat's out of the bag, okay? Everyone has the resources to have their employees work remotely. But that isn't going to be an automatic accommodation. It can be, and it may ultimately be, but you would still need to engage in the interactive process. The other thing is, I mean, I think a lot of organizations are realizing this might be better, right? That maybe we'll only have the clerk's office come in, these two individuals from the clerk's office come in these 2 days, or there's going to be so much change in so many different scenarios in every different community. I think everyone should go into it with an open mind. If you go into it, with the strict, the way it was before, I think you're going to struggle because there are going to be requests for accommodations. There are going to be scenarios that should be addressed on a case-by-case basis. So my recommendation would be to go into this with an open mind.
Hey, before I start looking at the questions that have been presented, any last thoughts or parting advice or wisdom that you want to give all of us?
I think as we've both said, like, things are so out of control right now. From my perspective, I think it's sad and unfortunate because I'm always talking to the people that, that are like really emotional, really drained. And I see the impact that it's having on individuals. And I just hope that anyone that's on a board or is an appointed official within a town, or even a department head realizes that, that their behaviors really can impact people's lives. And a little bit of respect, a little bit of appreciation, a little bit of kindness really can go very far with these employees. And as you said, a little bit of the mindset of work appropriately. I think, every town can benefit from that. It's only going to put you in the right direction.
So I just pulled up the questions and I'll do my best. I'm trying not.
Okay. Okay. So first off, thank you to everybody for sitting through that and putting up with that. I realized that was really long, especially everybody in the audience and everybody watching at home. I hope you were able to get something from that. We're a board of elected by the town, representation of its residents, and this is not our full-time job. And a lot of times there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know about, and we have professional staff that can give us as much advice as possible, and we got to take their word for it and or educate ourselves, because in this line, I didn't know can only get you so far. So there has been requests for some professional development amongst the board. Next month we're doing the OML workshop. This month we did this. Hopefully in March we can do something else that can benefit us as a board and benefit the town. Like I stated earlier, in our packets we have some examples of code of conduct policies, and one specifically from Maya, what they recommend. So again, I hope you got something out of that. And is there any additional discussion?
I think it was very informative. I think we need to continue to do this. I think we need to make this to the public like you did tonight, because you're right, there are people out there giving us misinformation, whether it's intentional or not, I don't know, but there it is. Tells you exactly what the code of ethics is, code of conduct, and we can certainly ask questions and make comments, but now people know what it is, okay? And it seems to me that a lot of it's on us, that we're under scrutiny. They're not stopping citizens from speaking or doing what they have to do. It has to do with the five of us and any other public official. So I don't know where I am on this, but I do think it's a good start, and I think that it was very informative. I do have one question. Do we have any opinion from town council as to, if we develop this type of a code of conduct, what kind of position it puts the town in if an issue ever should come up? Does that strengthen our position, or I'd like to know if you could get that advice. We know that The insurance company recommends it. I know the Association of Selectmen recommend it. But I'd like to see what town council's version would that be to protect the town. And again, there's a lot of responsibility on us that we need to control ourselves and be respectful and be able to disagree, which we do, but respect one another's opinion and stay focused on the issue. And I think we're going to be fine. But thank you very much for doing that.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we will move on to Selectmen's community announcements. Vice Chair?
I have nothing.
Okay.
I'm with Cheryl. I don't have anything tonight either.
That makes three of us.
The only thing that I'll say is, and I had mentioned it to Mike, I believe it's on the agenda for next meeting, but because it's January and our policy indicates we're supposed to advertise it in January, the Hannah Harwood application is available again to our scholars in town. So I believe, Mike, you said that we're going to talk about it at the next meeting. Is that
We'll
correct?
we'll put it on the agenda next meeting so that it gets larger headlines.
Okay, but-
And it will be put out through the town
Sure.
and the school system as well.
But so just to the scholars out there, start thinking about picking up an application because it's a scholarship that's available through the town. And that's all.
I have two things real quick. One is a while back, the board voted to have me represent the Board of Selectmen through the school committee's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee. And I just wanted to give just a quick update because we've had a few meetings since that has started. One of the most recent meetings, the subcommittee voted to approve its mission statement. And I just wanted to share that with the board and the town as a whole, just to try and get more spotlight on it. And the mission statement is: the Oxford School District is deeply committed to promoting awareness, tolerance, and appreciation to our community's diverse culture. The district strives for a community that is inclusive regardless of age, gender, sexual orientation, race, culture, or abilities. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee endeavors to foster an environment that is respected through the community and welcoming to all students, faculty, and staff. That's their mission statement that they voted on. As we've discussed in the subcommittee, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint to the finish line. There's a good representation of people that show up to this committee, subcommittee, and we're learning. So we're taking these categories such as age, gender, sexual orientation, race, and we're inviting people to come into the subcommittee and speak on their experiences in town, their experiences in school. We've talked to groups such as grandparents raising grandchildren, LGBTQ so far, and we continue to bring in additional speakers just so we can kind of start wrapping our head around where improvements need to happen in town, within the school district and the town. They have definitely asked me to try and get some more community involvement in regards to getting their statement out there and assisting in any way that the town can. I think this mission statement is very well written, well worded, and speaks volumes to how, as a community, we care about everybody, regardless of what type of representation, what type of person you are. You're cared about here. And I think moving forward, it's something that hopefully the select board can get more involved with. And I'll continue to give you updates as the meetings go along and try and share some ideas with how we can help. And then that was it. So that's all I had to share for this evening. Sorry. Anything else amongst the board? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And I will vote yes, that's 5 in affirmative. Meeting for January 25th is adjourned. Thank you.